Action Supervisor for the Office of Sustainability. And Wendy.
Hi, Wendy Fuster, Climate Action Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability.
David.
Hey again, everyone. My name's David. I'm an intern with the office. Been helping out the past few months, so good to see everybody again.
And Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a law student at the University of Richmond, and I'm interning with the office this summer.
Thank you. Dawn Williamson.
Hi, I'm Dawn Williamson. I'm with the RVA Zero Waste Committee or Initiative.
Great. And Tom Griffin.
Hi, Tom Griffin. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Green Travel Alliance.
Thank you. Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Fasteman. I'm the Program Coordinator in the Office for Sustainability with the University of Richmond.
Thank you. Maeve.
Hi, I'm Maeve. I am a rising junior at the University of Richmond, and I'm interning with Wendy at the Office of Sustainability.
Thank you. Kayla. I think Kayla's also in class, so she might be doing two things.
I think she just unmuted. I think. I know she's muted again.
Okay.
I
Kendra.
wanted to throw out too that I have this being recorded. I'm supposed to tell everybody this is being recorded in case you have issues.
Kayla, I see that you're unmuted. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can. I guess we can't hear you. But Kayla, we're happy to have you with us today. Kendra, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Kendra, the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability for the city.
Thanks. And let's see, how about Ryan?
I'm Ryan Duckett. I'm a consultant for SCS Engineers and president of the Virginia Composting Council.
Thank you. Let's see, Jason.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. Computer problems, but I'm Jason, and I run a conservation landscaping company and compost guy.
Great. How about Katrina?
Hello there, I'm Katrina Ensminger. I'm a management analyst in the Department of Public Works Operations Division.
Great, thank you. Did I miss anybody? I think we'll have a few more joining us, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with today's presentation. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Let me make sure I have the right one up here. Okay, so the first link or the first slide on this presentation has links in it, and that is because we are using Microsoft Teams, and so city staff doesn't have access to the chat feature in Teams. So this is a way for everyone to be able to access the meeting slides, the agenda, the C40's Urban Climate Action Impacts Framework Report. That's a tool that we'll be using in our breakout for as a resource, and then the link at the end to the survey. So this is where you can access links. And then the second slide is where you can put in any kinds of questions or share resources if you don't have access to the chat. David Sale will be keeping an eye on the chat and letting us know if there's something that we need to respond to, but otherwise those are your two ways to kind of communicate back and forth during the presentation, or we're a small group, feel free to just wave or speak up, and we're happy to answer any questions as we go. So today's meeting is on impacts and indicators, and we're happy to have all of you back. I think this will be an interesting activity, and we're really looking forward to getting your input on the prioritized strategies that we elevated at the last meeting. Wendy, would you like to go through the agenda and objectives for today?
Sure. Okay, so first up on our agenda, we've already completed, is the introduction. So we've settled in, well, actually, and we'll go over the ground rules. Then we're going to review the revised strategies that we ended up with after our last working group meeting. We'll go over some key concepts regarding impact mapping, which is what we'll be doing today. And then our activity will be making impact maps for our prioritized strategies. And then we'll do our conclusion, wrap up, and next steps. So the objectives for today is to identify the potential impacts of the prioritized strategies. So we're trying to figure out, what is it that we are trying to impact through these strategies? And then what does success look like for each of those? And what's our shared understanding of what we can achieve through these strategies? So the ground rules and expectations, they're the ones we've been using throughout. So respect, be present, everybody participate, no one dominate, be additive, not repetitive. We'll aim for consensus, be open to new ideas, bring solutions to our problems, separate people from problems, speak from your experience. We don't have the Zoom thumb anymore, sorry, but and then Elmo, which is enough. Let's move on and make space. So there you go.
Thanks, Wendy. And I think we might have some reactions. Yeah, up at the top, there's like a smiley face with a hand. So if you want to give a thumbs up, yeah, we call them Zoom reactions, but I guess we need to change that to Teams reactions. So still trying to be interactive in this strange virtual world, but I think we're all pretty used to it at this point.
Yeah. Well, now you can smile and heart things and all sorts of, even better.
All right, so this is where we are in the process. We have developed and refined the strategies, and now we're moving into creating the implementation framework and metrics. So very exciting. This meeting and the next couple are going to get us ready for the next phase of public engagement that's going to happen during the month of September. So just to go back over, at the last meeting, we went through the strategy prioritization, and that was taking, going over the matrix and the scoring and the weighting of all of the strategies. We had 188 strategies all together through all 5 pathways, and we got your great feedback. We took your advice on what we could let go, what was really important, what could be kind of rolled up under others, and really thinking about, what can we focus on so we can ensure success of reaching our goals. So then today we're going to be asking the questions, what are the potential impacts of our strategies, so we can think more deeply about how to measure success and how to begin thinking about the steps necessary to reach those goals. And then over the next 2 meetings, we'll be meeting again on July 15th and August 5th. And that's when we'll be thinking about how can we equitably implement the plan, the actual next steps of the plan, and how we ensure accountability and transparency. Okay, so in terms of the structure, just to remind you all, we've made it all the way down through the goals, the vision, the community priorities, the pathways, objectives, prioritized strategies was last time, and now we're going to be talking about impacts today. So how will our strategies impact the community and lead to a more equitable, resilient, and adaptive Richmond? That work is going to help us identify the indicators that we're going to use to measure success of this plan. And then we'll be going into the implementation, as I said, where we'll measure progress and ensure accountability. So refined strategies. This is where we reveal where we landed with ours. The distribution looks much better now that we talked through what's important to you, and we ended up with 9 strategies across 4 objectives. At the last set, we got all your great feedback on the priorities. We looked at what would make sense to achieve the greenhouse reductions goals, and then what made sense in terms of the bigger picture and how we can really fold these up to be more effective given all of our stakeholders' involvement. So under objective 1, the objective is model zero waste through municipal operations. So again, this is everything that's city-owned, controlled by the city of Richmond, municipal operations. So the first strategy that was prioritized is zero waste. City operations will align with Executive Order 77 and demonstrate high-impact zero waste practices in design and expansion. The city will lead by example by modeling and tracking zero waste internally through actions that align with community goals and foster behavior change among city employees. The second strategy under Objective 1 is municipal composting. And that one says conduct food waste and diversion education and awareness activities and provide options for composting in all city-owned buildings, parks, schools, and facilities. Make compost and mulch available to city properties, residents, and small businesses. Under Objective 2, which is reduce commercial waste, we have 3 strategies. The first one is incentivize, support, and provide education for the creation of facilities and services to provide equitable access to organic waste collection and composting. Encourage and incentivize organic waste reduction activities at all commercial buildings. The second one is recycling. So mandate an equitable multifamily and commercial recycling program for new and existing properties with equivalent levels of service as trash collection at no additional cost to renters, including providing information on how to recycle e-waste. And the third objective is, or the third strategy under Objective 2 is about public engagement. So create a geographically and demographically representative task force to mobilize support for legislation banning plastic bags, phasing out of polystyrene containers, balloon release bans, and other commercial waste reduction initiatives in alignment with Executive Order 77. Include an education campaign to inform how to reduce environmental impacts generated by consumer choices. Objective 3 is reduce residential waste. So those 2 strategies are residential composting, establish an equitable citywide food waste diversion and reduction program that makes composting accessible to all by including educational measures for on-site and backyard composting, operational measures for weekly curbside pickup, and convenient drop-off composting. Prioritize city housing projects whose residents experience the highest levels of urban heat. And the second strategy is waste management. So create an accessible, large-scale education campaign for all residents about the incentives and benefits of reducing waste, eliminating litter, and the consequences of not doing so. As part of this effort, roll out a Save as You Save campaign that encourages reductions in residential trash volume. Objective 4 is reduce industrial waste, and we ended up with 2 strategies. So environmental justice, implement measures to identify the potential impacts of new facilities on neighboring communities, and advocate for state and regional policies that reduce industrial waste from facilities and frontline communities. Incentivize waste reduction programs and manufacturing processes that minimize greenhouse gas emissions and require external and transparent industrial waste audits. And the final strategy is construction and disposal standards. So develop and update construction standards and protocols to require environmentally friendly and equitable processes, including required permit siting and staging for recycling and composting, requirements for demolition material recycling reporting, and incentives for companies that earn zero waste certification. So if we could achieve all of that, that would be a beautiful Richmond, wouldn't it? All right, so let's talk about.
Dawn, we have a question from.
Yes.
Tom has his hand raised.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, hi, Don. Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, that sounds great, and I agree. Yeah, it's really nice to get down to a level of, okay, let's have some real strategies in place and build the projects and actions around it. From our discussions and things, I think you all did a good job of incorporating things from last time around. However, there were some things that I just jotted down that I thought were missing. And so I was just wondering if we're going to have a chance to further give that type of input? I know it's kind of, like that's probably what last time was about, really. But, I just had a couple of, just a couple of big things. Can I bring them up right now or?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, one was simply in objective 1. There was no vegetative, leaves composting aspect. And I think we did talk a good bit about that, just the fact that the city used to have a pretty good, collection program there where they made mulch and things like that available to the public even. And then I guess, yeah.
Well, let me clarify. So that's a good point. And yesterday we noticed that this municipal composting conduct food waste should really say organic waste. So that was changed somewhere else, but not here. I'm sorry. But then what you're talking about, I believe, is residential composting, providing residential yard waste composting. Not this municipal is for parks, public property. And so the second objective, or the third objective, is reduce residential waste. So for residential composting,
sure.
We probably need to add, yeah, I think you're right. So we need to modify some of the language in both of those. And this is definitely the time to do that, is tweaking the final language. Would that meet both of those?
I think, but, just specifically, you wouldn't want it lost that, I think the language here says something about backyard composting and things like that. But, really, what used to be, and I'm not necessarily saying that that's what the future has to look like, but it used to be we had leaf pickup, and we've had, leaf pickup wasn't being used, composted or turned into mulch in probably the past decade. But we had a very vigorous program, that dealt with leaves and tree limbs and all the vegetative debris used to be not go in the landfill. And so I think we had a good bit of discussion about that, at least in the breakout groups.
Okay, great.
And then the last little thing I had under 2C, under strategies for public engagement, there was really no mention of educating about composting there, which I think is kind of a big deal. And then also, let's see, I jotted this down, but engagement about recycling and even separation opportunities. I don't know that we really talk too much about that, but certainly I think that should be something that's, I think some of the recycling industry discussions are moving back that direction. Trying to figure out, like for instance, in Northern Virginia, they've stopped recycling glass, but they're providing, glass only containers. Fairfax County has like 35 of these. So anyway, I think that's something for us to not forget anyhow.
Great. I appreciate you bringing those up, because that's those are great examples of what we need to make sure we're identifying in the impact mapping that we'll be doing next, and then tweaking the language in these strategies, and then remembering to pull back into the implementation steps coming up. So these strategies, they do need to be clear enough that they encompass, the points you're bringing up are basically, even though they're kind of embedded in there, it's not clear enough in the statement itself. So I think those are great examples. But let me start moving into the mapping activity so you can see where we might be able to pull out a few more of those details through this effort. So impact mapping is a framework for describing and measuring the wider impacts of urban climate action. As we know, these strategies produce multiple benefits, and they can become powerful tools and create the information that we need to better design our actions. And of course, they're critical at reducing the barriers to action and helping our decision makers with the information they need to move these strategies forward. So the distribution of an impact, whether it's equitable or not, is at the core of this approach. As we've been talking all along, we really want to make sure that we're centering all of these strategies on equity. The example here is that if the net growth in jobs was focused on a part of the population where employment is already high, such as high-skilled workers, but it detracts from those in areas of high unemployment, then it would be inequitable and possibly damaging. So we want to be thinking about the pros and cons of these strategies. The pathway steps are the action itself. What are the outputs of the action? Then what are the outcomes and the impacts? So, we're using this impact mapping in our process to identify all of those impacts. And then this staff is going to take them, look at them across all the strategies and think about how they can connect to indicators that can be measured to track the implementation and accountability of all of our objectives. So we want to get from the language we have here that we just talked through on all those strategies to the actual details that we're trying to accomplish, and how can we measure that. This mapping activity is borrowed from the C40 Urban Climate Action Impacts Framework, and it was put together to help cities explore the wider impacts of climate action. And so there is a guide attached to the email from yesterday that has some examples of impacts that you can use while we go through the activity, but let me go a little deeper into what this looks like. So the mapping structure starts with what they call sector, and that's what we're calling objectives. Then the action is the strategy itself and the language in the strategy that is active. And then we want to be thinking about the outputs of that strategy and the outcomes of the outputs. So if the output is kind of the thing, then the outcome is the change or activity that's resulting from the output. And then that leads to impacts, and we want to really dig down to what are the final impacts that meet the greatest stakeholders. And this activity of identifying the outcomes and impacts is what will help us identify potential indicators for measuring the success of our plan. Let me make sure I didn't miss any notes here. The intermediary steps between the strategies and the impacts. That's what we really want to try to pull out. That's going to help us identify the steps. And back to Tom's point, I think those outputs and outcomes are some of those steps that we want to identify that might be missing if it's not already in the strategy. Some of the language that'll help us lead to the actual action plan and steps in the implementation phase. All right, so these are the definitions of those areas of the map. So the first one is the sector, and that's the area of the action or strategy. So we're calling that the objective is the sector. The strategy is the policy or program or investment that's initiated with the intention to provide some contribution to equitable climate mitigation or adaptation. So that's the strategy level. The output, as I said, is what the strategy produces. So it could be a provided service, a facility, an infrastructure, or a financial tool. And then the outcome is the change generated by the output. And it's necessary for the intended impact to occur. So it's a real, it's a bit of a challenge to separate the outputs from the outcomes to the impacts. But this is what we need you for, because you guys are the experts. So then the impacts are the medium or long-term effects of the outcomes. So things like reduced traffic congestion, reduced energy bills, reduced ground level ozone. And on the attachment with the taxonomy, there's lots of other impacts. But let me explain those a little in a little more detail. So for types of impacts, we like to think of the 3 pillars of sustainability. What we're considering: social impacts, economic impacts, environmental impacts, and of course, our 7 community priorities are listed here. These are the priorities that are most important to Richmonders. So we want to be sure that our strategies are addressing racial equity and environmental justice, that we're providing the potential to promote racial equity and support those historically disenfranchised communities in our strategies. We want to make sure that we're the government accountability is centered with the potential to promote transparency. Community wealth is important. We want to build community wealth and increase jobs and education access. In terms of housing and buildings, we want to expand affordable housing and reduce housing cost burden. So that's why we're being cautious about any additional fees or costs involved in these new services that we're discussing. In terms of neighborhoods, we want to support beautiful and safe neighborhoods. I think we're all here for that purpose. The health of Richmonders, we want to promote physical and mental health and well-being. And of course, engagement and communication, very important to litter and recycling efforts. So we want to support equitable engagement and communication. And this table on the right is just, these are some examples of environmental impacts that we'll be thinking about with our climate action plan. You know, water quality, air quality, ecosystems. But then, of course, there are 4 other pages of that attachment that go through some of the other themes. Let's see, so it's a systemic perspective. As we know, city life is highly interconnected because as we all know, the environment and society and the economy all impact each other in complex dynamics. People's health and prosperity are intimately dependent on environmental management and biodiversity. Safety and fairness of jobs enhance physical and mental health. Government accountability and community engagement improve all aspects of city life, from community scale projects that enhance neighborhood livability to the better design and monitoring of our policies. The aesthetic quality and cultural heritage of Richmond are drivers of tourism and economic prosperity for all, and improved equality is directly related to trust, civic participation, social cohesion, and ultimately sustainability. So with that, let me show you an example. So this is on the strategy for public engagement under Objective 2, reducing commercial waste, which says create a geographically and demographically representative task force to mobilize support for legislation banning plastic bags, phasing out of polystyrene containers, balloon release bans, and other commercial waste reduction initiatives in alignment with EO 77. Include an education campaign to inform how to reduce environmental impacts generated by consumer choices. So the strategy is public engagement and a commercial waste task force with a couple of subcomponents, legislation advocacy and waste reduction education campaign. And then we want to think about the outputs. What is the output, the thing coming out of that strategy? Well, we're going to create a formal citizen engagement platform. It will lead to new legislation introduced and passed in the General Assembly, and it will create education materials, infographics, presentations, etc. So those are the outputs of the strategy. But what are the outcomes? What change is happening? What activity will result from that output? Well, formal citizen engagement platform will lead to increased community support and buy-in. And then ultimately, what is the impact on our community that's going to meet the greatest need? Well, potentially increase social trust. On the legislation advocacy, so if we have this new legislation that's passed, the outcome is reduced plastics, polystyrene, etc. The impacts, so we have increased use of alternative materials that could potentially lead to higher business costs. We do want to identify any negatives that we want to, alleviate or reduce those barriers that would prevent this from not being successful. And it will reduce landfill waste. Reduced plastics also leads to less litter. The single-use plastics end up in our ditches and they don't decompose very fast. So cleaner ecosystems, cleaner, more beautiful neighborhoods. And then for the education materials, the outcome, we could see reduced packaging waste. We could see more sustainable consumer purchasing habits. And this would lead to potentially more purchasing from local and small businesses and farmers markets, and that leads to economic growth. We want to keep digging down to those measurable impacts that will really get at the greatest need. And so when we go back up here to reduce landfill waste, that's a good one, but then think a little further. Maybe that's going to allow more money for alternative programs. If we have less hauling going back and forth, we can use city resources for a composting program, right? So this is just an example of breaking down one of the strategies. I'm sure all of you can think of more outputs, outcomes, and impacts that could go on here. So we do want your contributions to that. But that is one example. So the way we're going to do this is go into breakout rooms and develop those maps for each strategy. So you're going to have there are 4 facilitators, and each of us will take whoever's interested in focusing on one objective or another. There will be opportunities after today to go back in and look at the other ones and add more thoughts to the other maps. But you'll have 30 minutes per strategy. So we have already plugged in the strategy and the outputs for you that we could think of. If you can think of others, great. Your facilitator will be moving all the text boxes around and arrows and adding to it. And you guys just have to discuss. Think out loud, talk. It's going to be an interactive conversation. If you do have more context to add and you want to type into the comments at the bottom, that's fine. But this is really your space to give us your all. So you're going to be thinking about the outcomes of the strategy. Like I said, the outputs are there. If you can think of others, we do want to add them. Those are the direct, tangible results of the strategy. And then the outcomes, what's the change generated by the output? And then really get down to what are the potential impacts that could result from the strategy. So remember to integrate equity considerations. Who are the key stakeholders? What are their priorities and concerns? And how is the strategy potentially impacting them positively or negatively? If there are some there, we want to focus on the impacts that are most significant, not just every impact that it's possibly going to have, because that you could spend all day on any one of these, but really be thinking about which are the ones that are most important to highlight. So with that, I'm going to ask you to put your name under, you can go into this Google Doc and type your name under the sign up. Under Alexis, who's going to be going over municipal waste. Wendy will be facilitating commercial waste. David is facilitating residential waste, and I am facilitating the 2 industrial waste objectives and strategies. And if you can't access the Google Slides, you can just tell Wendy, and she will type your name in there while I start setting up the breakout rooms. So any questions at this point? Okay, so it's 9:34. It's going to take me a few minutes to get the breakout room set up. So why don't we take a break and we'll come back at 9:40, and we're here to answer questions in the meantime.
Sign up before you take your break if you have a preference. If not, we'll put you in a room.
Yeah, Teams is it's not as quick as Zoom, so it is going to take me a few minutes to get everyone where they want to be.
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting into there to sign up for that thing. So
Okay.
slap me in 2 or 3, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Same here, Wendy. Will you put Katrina in municipal waste?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, this is Jeannie. I'm having trouble too because I use my phone. So could you put me in either municipal or residential waste, whichever one needs people?
Sure.
Thanks.
I'll put you in residential. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, I'll jump in commercial waste if I could. I'm sorry, I missed the instructions on that.
Okay. Gotcha.
This is Tyler. Put me in industrial waste.
Okay. I'm sorry, who was that? That was
Tyler for
Tyler.
industrial waste.
Gotcha. Okay.
Wendy, this is Torrance. You can put me in whatever one needs somebody.
Okay. How about, do you want municipal or are you trying to avoid that?
We will be moved around, correct?
No. So if you have a preference, let me know and I'll put you there. If you'd rather stay away from municipal, I can put you in residential or something else.
I don't mind municipal.
Okay, thanks, Torrance.
You know, I'm thinking residential might be good because for you, Torrance, just because that's the services one.
Right.
So
You want to
yeah.
try that? Okay, I'll put him over there.
Municipal is the city buildings, but you
Right.
guys go over.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Let's see, we got Katrina, Jason, Tom. I know Ryan had to check out. Oh, let's see, Sharon wants to be in commercial. Sorry, I see your note now in the chat. Oops. Okay. Anybody else for municipal with Katrina? She's not by herself. Kelsey, Kayla, anyone?
So Wendy, yeah, you could just go ahead and assign them randomly to even them out if people don't have a preference.
Okay. Let's see who all's here. Let's see. Who's the distance? Let's see.
This is Tyler again. You can put me anywhere you want if you want to.
Oh, no, you're good where you are. Thank you. Oh, Priscilla. Priscilla. I will put her in residential.
I am not seeing Kelsey on my list.
Oh.
Is she under a different name or did she leave?
Let's see, maybe she left. No, you're right, I don't see her anymore. Okay, sorry about that. I saw her name up higher in the chat, so I. Okay. And then I didn't add any of our staff anywhere. I'll let you do that, or interns. All right, so we got Wendy, Alex, David, Dawn, Elle, Jason, Jeannie, Katrina, Maeve, Dawn, Torrance, Sharon, Tom, Tyla, and Priscilla. So I think when it says others from chat, does that mean that they were invited, but they're not actually here? Okay.
I think so.
Okay, got it.
All right, so then Dawn Williamson will go with me. Did she say?
I don't think you did. Did you say? Did you have a preference, Dawn? Dawn Williamson? Didn't see one. So go ahead.
Okay, I think I have everyone where they need to be. So I'm gonna send you there. It'll take a couple minutes to get you there. But I just want to remind you, so we have 1 hour and your facilitator is going to keep an eye on the clock. And when you're done, you'll come back to the main room. That's where I'll be. If for any reason you are in your objective and you think you want to switch to another one, you can come back out to the main room and I'll put you in with one of the other facilitators. What else am I forgetting? Co-facilitators.
That's good.
Yeah, so just don't click on the red leave button in the top right corner. You'll leave the whole meeting. If you want to come back to the main room, click on the return to main meeting, and the facilitators will let you know when it's time for the whole group to come back. I can't, come grab you like Zoom lets me do and teleport you. So I'm going to open the rooms, and and we'll see what happens.
Magic.
Yeah. So David, you didn't get a notice? There he goes. I don't know why it's so slow. All right, so we have, and then Maeve, I had sent you to another one, but it's just so slow.
Yeah, and I can go anywhere too, so.
All right. Well, if it doesn't send you, then it says opening, so I'm not sure what happened. Here, let me try that one more time. Yeah, it should have sent you there, so it might be something with the browser. So feel free to contribute to ours. Tyla and Elle and Dawn, thank you for being here to talk about industrial waste. The first one is environmental justice, address industrial waste impacts on frontline communities. So just to remind you, the strategy itself, we're going to implement measures to identify the potential impacts of new facilities on neighboring communities and advocate for state and regional policies that reduce industrial waste from facilities and frontline communities. Incentivize waste reduction programs and manufacturing processes that minimize greenhouse gas emissions and require external and transparent industrial waste audits. So the strategy itself is legislative advocacy and waste reduction in manufacturing processes. And for the outputs, we thought that the legislative advocacy would produce new legislation introduced and passed in the General Assembly. So if this is around, facilities, reducing industrial waste from facilities and frontline communities, what would the outcome or outcomes be? We're looking for the changes generated by the new legislation. Can you think of any ideas there? Oops.
Improved air quality, improved water quality. I don't know if that's.
Those are, yeah, those are the impacts, the medium or long-term effect. I know this is a tricky exercise.
That's what I figured.
We're trying to identify those steps between the legislation and the clean water. What's going to happen here?
Well, I guess you're going to have some sort of like penalty for, not working within whatever identified bounds there are, which is a tricky line because we need to avoid the, you can buy your way out of the fact that you are an excessive polluter, right?
Yep, so penalties for pollution, the impact of that is what a negative could be, that the businesses leave, right? They go somewhere else.
Or that they get more stringent on their own, levels of output.
So if there's a penalty for pollution, then industry improves practices.
That's a nicer way to say what I was thinking. Sorry, it's still morning time.
Oh, I know, we're all there. And then let's say that if they have improved practices, then we have cleaner water and air, right?
Right. And healthier citizens.
Yep.
I'm curious as to like whether another outcome could be like more actively engaged citizens that live on the front lines. Like, is
I
that
like that.
how we're thinking about things as well? Because if there's new legislation passed and it's aimed at somebody's like, you know, at a couple of very particular neighborhoods, you're doing active outreach and building a base in these areas so that way they can testify or whatever it is in front of the General Assembly. So like hopefully there's a greater sort of civic consciousness that exists when we do legislative advocacy. Again, I don't know if that quite falls into the I don't know if that is the point of this map.
No, you're right. You're on the right track. I'm trying to think about where this fits in. And Maeve and Alex have both been involved in these all week. So if you guys have thoughts on where these ideas fit, please speak up. So yeah, so we have legislative advocacy as a strategy. And we're saying that the output is the new legislation that's introduced and passed, but somewhere in here, I guess an outcome is more civic engagement. Is that what you were saying?
In
Of frontline communities?
Right, yeah, in communities that were historically like underrepresented, right?
Yeah.
I guess if we have penalties for pollution, then we could also have incentives for, you know, not polluting, I guess.
Yes. So let's go back to, before I lose that train of thought though, on the civic engagement in historically disenfranchised communities, what's the impact of that at the end of the day? When we think about all those impacts.
Like a more democratic city and like Commonwealth, right? More engaged, meaningful participation. I think.
It's almost there. I'm trying to think what's measurable.
Could you put in something about public pressure? I'm not sure where you'd like to put that in, but we do have public pressure will create an environment for the polluter to make sure they get the public to buy their product.
Maybe you could say like more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. What'd you say, Meg?
Like more effective future legislation if you already have like a base of support from the people that you're trying to work with.
Yeah, so we have civic engagement, then we have, I think, kind of merging what Tyla and Maeve were saying, that we have public,
you could say like foundational relationships or something like that.
maybe civic engagement, improved civic engagement is an impact, and there's an intermediary that's more like an outcome. I don't know. This gets so
I'd like
tricky.
to throw in an idea of creating, good and bad. In other words, incentive versus fear. If you can say a nice way of creating fear in people, if this doesn't happen, their health will be impacted.
Maybe
Okay.
that's just like a greater exchange of information rather than categorizing it as, fear, like these are the facts sort of deal. I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna split this into two because
I think of a good word for to mitigate the word fear. But a lot of things happen because of fear, but rather than good. Incentives sometimes don't really get people's attention. Fact sheets that talk about illnesses, that creates an underlying fear, gets things done that way.
okay, let's go back to our two outcomes. We have this new legislation is the output coming out of legislative advocacy. An outcome is that we now have penalties for pollution, where potentially we have some industry leaving. And then we also have improved practices. Both of those are actually ways to lead to our desired result. And when the industry leaves, there is less public dollars. So that's not good either.
Well, industry may be encouraged. In other words, a new industry might pop up. It's less harmful.
But that's not an outcome of the new legislation, unless people want more rules. They're not going to come here because, or can you think of an industry that would come here because we're strict about our environmental policies?
Yeah, I mean, they might say they are.
Okay, so I think we're good on the top level. But this next one, so the industry improves their practices, leads to cleaner air and water. But this one, okay, so now, oh, I'll delete this. The civic engagement piece, let's think that one through. I like the way you guys are going. Okay, well, actually, before we jump to civic engagement, you were saying that the new legislation, like the fear or the public pressure, how is that? That's really from the civic engagement, right? Is that what were you suggesting that comes from?
It's hard for me to know where to put things in. It's like
a
puzzle.
I know, it really is. This is just a framework for starting to think through how to really make our plan successful. So,
right.
So if the new legislation,
I mean, it's that industrial stuff that is really some of the worst, and we don't know it's. If you could find out what's in it, you'd have to do the research and see, what. Well, you'd have to have legislation that asks what the chemicals were. That could be one of the legislations. Pieces of legislation would be, what are these chemicals? And
well, yes, and you're right.
What harm could they do without saying fear? If that's, you don't want you want this to be a really workable document. I understand that. So you have to help me out here, but
well, what if we went to, because part of the strategy is implement measures to identify the potential impacts of facilities on neighboring communities. So some kind of measure to do that research. If a new industry is coming into the city, we want to create some kind of like a framework for, what'd you say?
encourage them to come in if they have a better way of taking care of their waste. We don't want you to come in unless you can take care of all that horrible waste you're going to put out. We'd love to have you come in your dollars, in your tax money. It'd be wonderful for the environment, for the community, for the workforce, as long as you can let us know what your output is as far as harmful waste.
Okay, so the output of this identifying impacts of new facilities is some kind of a checklist or scorecard for identifying the impacts, right, of new facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have this checklist or scorecard, the outcome is going to be cleaner industries attract, Richmond attracts cleaner industries. And maybe that also leads to the civic engagement piece, because they're going to care if they have a say in who's coming and doing the research. Maybe they would even be involved in that process if it's like, in these neighborhoods, right?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, advocacy is all over the place, isn't it? That's why it's grassroots. All right, so then back to civic engagement.
The thought I had on that is less segregated communities.
I like it. Can you think of any other impacts of less segregated communities?
I don't know if that is like a direct impact so much as fostering a, you know what I mean? Like a more, that seems like a lot of credit to give to something. I don't mean that in a bad way.
Well, I like the direction it's going. So civic engagement.
Right, but that doesn't mean that necessarily all zoning laws are going to change in certain communities and that like there will be different accesses to wealth and it'll turn into mixed, you know what I mean? I don't know. I like the direction too.
Maybe you could say more attractive to all.
Yes, that makes sense. You have, more
Oh, hey,
reason.
Katrina. I'm sorry. Did you get in the wrong group?
No, I was in the municipal waste, but there was nobody in there. It was just me.
What?
I thought there was supposed to be like another person, a facilitator at least, but I don't even have the slide presentation in an email, so I couldn't even start working on it by myself. I'm sorry to mess up your momentum.
No, I'm glad you came back. That makes no sense.
So
You're the only one there?
I was the only one there.
Goodness gracious.
So maybe I was in the wrong place, like maybe somebody's somewhere working on municipal operations and I'm not there. Sorry to.
No, I feel badly now that you were. So Alex, would you like to take a shot at it with Katrina if I send the two of you to a breakout and you can try to work on the objective 1 strategies? What do you think?
Yeah, sure, we could do that.
All right, I'm so sorry, Katrina.
Yeah, I thought maybe I was in the wrong place.
I don't know, teams and these breakouts, it's messy, so I'm really sorry. Says opening. If it doesn't, we'll just all stay here and do it together. So. Did I send someone I wasn't supposed to? You're all here. Okay, everyone's still here. All right. So civic engagement in historically disenfranchised communities will lead to maybe not less segregated communities, but improved
A welcoming environment to all sections of society.
Yeah, I like that phrasing.
Say it again.
A welcoming environment to all what's the word? Sections of society. Sometimes I don't find the right word.
Yeah, but I think that dually gets at the fact that increased civic engagement generally means like more investment in your community, in your neighborhood, and it's getting at the fact that like there are going to be changes to the public health of this community that makes it more attractive because of more stringent environmental like toxins regulations, or rather like outputs. So I like that. Thank you, Tyler.
Okay, so welcoming environment actually doesn't lead to improved public health, but it does lead to maybe government accountability or transparency.
Well, maybe improved public health is like between the maybe like there's like a dual 2 arrows between the civic engagement and the clean water and air that both lead to a welcoming environment. I don't know if that is messing with the structure of the map too much, you know?
Well, the civic engagement is leading to cleaner air and water.
And both of those are leading to like a welcoming environment, in my opinion.
Or is the civic engagement leading to industry improving practices? Right? If they're engaged, that's what we're going for. Isn't that the in-between? I mean, civic engagement doesn't just turn into cleaner air and water. There has to be something in between, right?
But that's what the penalties for pollution are. You know what I mean? That's what's leading to the clean air and water.
I think there are 2 outcomes of the new legislation. It could lead to penalties off the bat, and it could lead to public pressure. And I think both of those, I don't think there are always penalties that lead to civic engagement. The new legislation leads to civic engagement. And with public pressure, between the penalties and the public pressure, they're both going to cause industry to improve practices.
Mm-hmm.
So civic engagement makes for
policy.
And I see what you're saying, that cleaner air and water, yeah, all these things relate to each other. It's kind of a cycle, and like evolving cycle. But can you think of any other impacts that would come out of the penalties or the civic engagement?
I was thinking welcoming to all sectors, and then maybe that leads to the potential for less segregated communities. I don't know.
Increase community diversity. Do you think that would?
Yeah, that's a probably better way to say it.
I'm not an expert there, so someone might say that's not exactly the case, but I think we're thinking in the same direction. Or at least racial equity and environmental justice. I mean, that's really what this is all about. So reduce industrial waste. Okay, then we have incentivize waste reduction programs. That's on the next slide, right? Yeah, okay. So now part of the strategy is identifying the impacts of new facilities. So we have this great checklist or scorecard. Richmond attracts cleaner industries, which leads to the cleaner water and air. Practices. Richmond attracts cleaner industry, so that leads to increased public dollars. We have increased revenue for programs. We have, how about jobs? Yeah, that's part of this too, isn't it? We have new industries.
I'm not sure how to do this, but it seems like we're probably all on the same wavelength, but with the new environment that we're in right now, there's so many more possibilities. I mean, every time I hear a lot of bad news on the news. I guess people do that too, but I also hear a lot of good news. And it just seems that with our new federal makeup, I say this correctly, that there's more excitement in the air, and maybe there's a way to pick up on that excitement and multiply it with what we're doing here in Richmond.
I love it. How do we say that?
I don't know. Plug it into the new opportunities that are happening on the federal level or on the global level.
New legislation. Mental health.
Mental, yeah, it has to do with mental health too, but I don't know how you'd say that in your document.
I don't know. Legislative advocacy.
Maybe like renewed faith in democracy, and that's that is an outcome of, or an
the new questioning of our democracy.
Yeah, I mean,
a new awareness.
I think it's government
How about
government accountability.
Something about stimulating our awareness of democracy, but I don't know how you put that in a document.
Well, I think it gets back to government accountability, you know, feeling like the government's really representing the people and doing what's best for the community. You're building that public trust.
I mean, the whole idea of the pandemic wiping everybody, you know, down. I mean, hitting everybody in a lot of different ways, and then coming out of it, and the opportunity to I don't want to say build back better because that's overly used now, but something like that. Plugging into the new awakened opportunities.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good. All right, so then if we go to the second part of this one, that's, we need to delete these ones. Because I had that on the other slide. We want to build out the second part of this, which is incentivize waste reduction programs. Incentivize waste reduction leads to I hear lots of dings. Am I? Yeah, it looks like. All right. So the output of waste reduction incentives are new waste reduction programs in manufacturing or industrial facilities. So, and then new requirement for thorough and complete impact assessments for siting. Okay, so this is about an outcome is more improved transparency in industrial waste and processes. And if we have improved transparency in our industries, then we have cleaner air and water. And that leads to healthier citizens and ecosystems. How about, I think it also leads to resiliency if there, was flooding and, fewer, if we didn't have to deal with spills, improved resiliency of industrial sites. And we have community during severe events, recovery, reduced recovery of frontline communities.
Maybe another outcome would be improved relationships between industry and citizens.
Yes.
Because usually it's us versus them. But if the citizens feel like industry is actually doing something, you know, is showing some care for the community, it would improve the relationship.
Yep. That's good.
That's right.
I like that. And the improved relationships, what's the final measurable impact there? Maybe we're looking for the medium or long-term effect of the outcome. So if the outcome is improved relationships between industry and citizens, what need does that meet? Is there an economic? Is there property values? We think about our community priorities, housing and buildings.
Confidence. Not sure.
In what?
In recommending the company to others. I'm not sure how you do that.
And maybe it's
Business Bureau, BBB, Better or other organizations like Better Business Bureau would give it their.
so that ultimately it increases their bottom line if people like the company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Increases revenues. So let's say profit increases to public dollars. And
public ownership. But I don't know how you do that, except if you went to Spain and went to Mondragon. Public ownership.
I think it community wealth, because they're going to give back. You know, they're gonna the industry is going to start supporting local programs and schools and do what that's part of.
Well, yeah, but that's what Dominion does, and that's so scary. They buy their way. We know that.
Yeah, tread lightly, right? I don't know that the revenue isn't coming from their profits. So I guess it's more like
Tax revenue, right?
Yep, just by them staying here, if the industry is happy and the citizens are happy, then that's what leads to government because they stay here.
Did we already say the word trust in there somewhere? Citizen trust.
Will improve. Okay, so then the trust. What is the end impact of trust? What's measurable about that gets it public priorities?
They would
Or
spread the
community.
word and use their product.
Yeah, so improve relationships, we'll just say, and trust. That's what leads to their profit increases and economic development, and ultimately government revenue and community wealth. Is there an education piece to any of it? Like if we're trying to, when you think about education access, workforce development, I'll just leave it as community wealth. Okay, so I think we've done pretty well with this. Thanks, guys. It's a hard one. Out of all the ones I've done this week, this one's one of the hardest. Because this is, for us, community organizers and advocates, like this is one of the hardest things to change. So, so if you think of anything else, please stop me. Otherwise, I'll jump on to this one, which is construction and disposal standards. So it says develop and update construction standards and protocols to require environmentally friendly and equitable processes, including required permit siting and staging for recycling and composting, requirements for demolition material recycling reporting, and incentives for companies that earn zero waste certification. That is a loaded statement. Okay, so we're talking about basically, end of the day, reducing industrial waste through their construction and their disposal. So we have equitable processes. The permit siting and staging, requirements for demolition, let's see, requirements for demolition material recycling reporting. Change this. Demolition material. And then zero waste certification. That is. Okay, so for the required permit, siting. Required. Okay, so when a company comes in, they have to have, if we're saying they have to have recycling and composting dumpsters and siting, concrete pads, their facility has to incorporate all of those recycling and composting measures in construction before they get their site plan approval. What's the outcome of that?
Do they need to have a permit to actually start doing this, like a public permit somewhere?
Yes. Well, yeah, it's in order for them to get their building permit, they would have to have it spelled out on there where they're going to have their recycling and composting staging.
So sometimes these permits would have to go through some agencies like the DEQ. Are we assuming they already got their permit?
Yeah, if that process is required, then what's the outcome?
Because we could go back and ask how did they get their permit? If they're going to be discharging some kind of toxic waste of some sort, then maybe they don't have their permit yet.
They can't operate until they have their permit.
Right. So if we went back a step and asked how they're getting their permit, then there's a public engagement process there, right?
Right. I guess there's also a question as to whether or not these permits are existing on top of DEQ's standards, or if you're building or if this it's like RVA green process is going to create sort of avenues for legislation for more stringent standards, so that way for Richmond to be in line with its goals, it's not building new permits that businesses need to acquire in addition to DEQ. You know what I mean? But that's I think taking it back in a similar way, Tyler. But in regards to outcomes outcomes to this particular output, you're gonna, if those permits are acquired, you're gonna have less going to sort of bigger industrial waste sites, and often those sites are in frontline communities, and so if there is less just waste that is generated, there are less communities that are going to be impacted, which again leads to that healthier citizens thing. But I am curious, because I think, Tyler, you bring up a really good point about process here and how these permits are going to be working in coordination with each other, or if it is just along DEQ. Yeah. Does that make sense? I'm kind of talking in circles, but.
Okay, well, let me see if I can help. So if the strategy is that somehow we are going to come up with construction and disposal standards that require all Richmond industries to have environmentally friendly and equitable processes that include required permit siting and staging for recycling and composting. It has requirements for demolition material recycling reporting during construction, and incentives for companies to earn zero waste. That's the piece that we can kind of control. I think the part that you guys are talking about is going to be at the next meeting, the next couple of meetings, when we start talking about the accountability and what decision makers are involved in this. I think I agree with you, that's very important, but we're trying to get to the impacts today of these strategies. If they're successful, what are the outcomes and impacts of them? Does that help?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so if we have improved public engagement, any other thoughts on that besides just the improved public trust? And if you can think of anything else, let me know. Required permit siting and staging. Maybe the impact is improved public engagement and the outcome is something else like by requiring the permit siting and staging, there is more transparency.
There's also a lot of background noise right now. I don't know if somebody.
I do.
So a lot of these will go to I guess designated landfills, right? Or I guess we're going to try to get it recycled.
Hey, Jeannie, how are you? Are you joining us, or did you want to go somewhere else?
You know what? I'm having a really hard time hearing you guys.
Huh.
I'm going to leave the meeting and then come back and see if that helps.
Okay.
If I can.
I think that might have been her. She's on a phone, so maybe she was messing with it.
There we go.
Okay.
There. Now I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me? Do you want to stay with us, or did you want to go to one of the other rooms?
No, I'll stay with you.
Okay.
If you want me.
Sure. We have another 10 minutes on this one, so let's give it our all.
Okay.
Okay, so if we're requiring permit siting and staging for recycling and composting at our manufacturing and industrial sites, then we'll have improved, I feel like citizens are gonna then see like it's public transparency, it's community advocacy, it is that public awareness. Education. I don't know what the impact of that improved public awareness is. What's the medium or long-term effect? No. All right. Well, less waste going to industrial waste sites. That one is definitely improved public health. On the demolition material recycling and reporting requirements, the outcome is, again, less waste going to industrial waste sites. Also, if they're required to report everything that they're trashing, then there's going to be fewer raw materials being wasted.
I thought about too those industrial reuse facilities. Somebody brought up in one of the meetings.
Yes.
It could create one of those reuse facilities, and that would, you know, if people can, I don't know if people go there and buy the items like RVA Scrap does, you know, for the creative reuse.
Yep.
But on an industrial scale, then, you know, that improves community wealth because it's a whole lot less expensive to buy it, you know, if it's donated or
yeah.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that's right. All kinds of things that are trash could be reused.
Absolutely.
If we just knew where to put them, I'd put them there.
Yeah.
Like an old toaster, what do? You know?
Right.
No, we should encourage that reuse.
Yes.
Make people happier, like me. I would like to recycle everything.
Well, that's the zero waste certification. Incentives will create material reuse facilities, which will lead to less waste going to landfills and community wealth. And what else?
It satisfies a need because kids have been taught this all their lives. And then to think that it's not really going anywhere is like, you know, all of a sudden there's no Santa Claus anymore.
That's true. It improves creativity. It improves mental health because for us to reuse things, it causes us to be creative, which actually helps our mental health. Instead of just buying something, which doesn't do anything. I mean, there's an initial high, but then you're just like, you know, it's not as healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's in the DNA of some people. I know it's in mine. I hate to throw anything away.
Oh, me too.
And I think you know, the educational component has really been important over the last 30, 40 years. As I say, every child has learned that you can recycle this and you can recycle that. You try to take away people's recycling, and it's even though it's hugely expensive right now. Of course, this is the residential stuff, but you know, people really would like to recycle, I think.
Can you think of any other impacts of this requiring zero waste in construction and disposal at industrial facilities?
Satisfies an innate, I want to say, what I was trying to say earlier, the the educational work of many years is ready to accept recycling, creative recycling.
You know, one of the impacts that we just discussed in residential recycling with the pay as you throw, or folks paying more when they send more to the landfill. And we thought that this might actually pertain more to commercial waste than residential. One of the negative things that we thought was that for smaller businesses or smaller construction companies, the temptation to illegally or inappropriately get rid of things is there, and so we would have to find a way to mitigate that or make it so unpalatable that they wouldn't be tempted to do it.
Mm. Oh, yeah, a negative here. I think,
you know, just like, and I used Richmond Henrico Turnpike as an example. When we decided to found the Cannon Creek Greenway, and we did the neighborhood cleanups, there were a couple of tons worth of construction materials. Imperial Plaza dumped a whole bunch of equipment down into the Greenway, and stupidly left their Imperial Plaza stencils on them, so we knew exactly where they came from. Tons of tires, I think 3 or 4 tons of tires that were dumped, and they were massive dumps, so it was clear that some tire company dumped them down there. So, you know, with that experience in mind, I kind of think that we need to find a way to make sure that illegal dumping doesn't become a thing when we require zero waste.
yeah. All right, any more? Construction disposal standards. I think the composting, you know, I do think that there are opportunities for that community trust and beautiful and safe neighborhoods. We just have to make sure we're connecting the outputs and the outcomes and impacts. If there's composting, maybe there's mulch available, maybe they're able to make the neighborhood more beautiful.
One of the things that we just discussed right along those lines is when there's composting available, and we make composting available and educate people about it, there the potential for lower cost home gardening, home vegetable gardening is a thing, which means that more people can afford to grow their own vegetables. Their health is better. Their kids' health is better. There's less garbage that green material the city has to pick up and landfill, and there's less fewer chemicals going into the water stream.
All right, well, I see folks coming back. All right, so I'd love to hear some feedback. How did that go?
Swimmingly.
Tell me about it, Jason. What are your thoughts?
Oh, wow. Okay, so where am I going? Commercial waste, or should I talk about composting?
I don't know. Talk about whatever your takeaways were from your
Or
breakout.
mapping, or the mapping process, or yeah, anything.
Oh yeah, this was fun. We a bunch of them. We found the impacts were actually outputs. We came up with impacts, and it turns out that they were outputs. And I'll bring up the one thing that we just discussed. We were talking about reducing commercial waste, and we realized that there are people already trying to reduce commercial waste by scavenging and making money through recycling facilities. And were those people to be given jobs at the city doing exactly what they're doing, you would increase equity, and you would reduce the amount that the people are doing illegal activities like digging under your house for your copper pipes.
Interesting. Yeah, it's such an interesting exercise to think about all that could come out of these strategies.
You know, just to, and I wasn't on the call the entire time, so I didn't bring this up before, but previously when I was really working with facilities one-on-one, like Jason said, when cardboard was market driven, there was an army of guys, and you would just see them scavenging, like whatever, for cardboard and things. And I would just I had a bunch of numbers in my phone, and I would just hook people up with that because they could get rid of their cardboard first, and then therefore they could minimize the size and capacity and space that they needed to recycle.
Yep. Excellent. You know what I think is so interesting about this pathway? So I was in the industrial waste, and I have to say, this was harder than some of the other ones I've been doing this week in the other pathways. And I think it's because, as I've been saying all along, waste touches everybody. We all create it, and we are all impacted by it if it's not disposed of correctly. That's why we're all passionate about this and part of this conversation. But to really think about the mapping of these strategies in this way, it's pretty complicated. It was harder than I thought it would be. Waste. What are some other thoughts, takeaways? But you're circling back to Tom's thoughts about composting and recycling separation. Did you see an opportunity for that here, or is that just going to be more of the implementation steps that we get to next time? Was anyone able to think about how to plug those ideas back into the mapping?
Sorry, I just had ADD brain. What did you just ask?
Oh, I was just asking about, Tom was bringing up some good points earlier about reconsidering where do we plug leaf pickup back into this, or recycling separation, and are those just maybe more along the lines of the implementation steps that we're going to get to next time? Or did anyone see a way to plug those kinds of outputs and outcomes back into the strategies through this exercise? Just curious.
Well, I can think of one right now. Is
Okay.
Building topsoil.
That
Yeah,
is a good
definitely
one.
rebuilding topsoil, and starting on the and this is just me thinking, starting on the Piedmont side of the fall line, and then moving forward. But,
yeah, so improve water and soil quality. We could say, topsoil. That's definitely important for composting.
all that cardboard, all those leaves, you can suffocate out invasives. You can build topsoil. I mean, there could be whole areas that are treated like, what do you call them? I know it's extreme, but like Superfund sites. But they're just filthy with invasives. You hack it down, you smother it, and you replant it. And you can smother it with the leaf matter, the compost, the cardboard, and you're building topsoil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's probably space also in our municipal operations. I think it's the first objective under municipal where we had, municipal composting. And it could probably fit somewhere in the, let's see, I thought maybe it could fit into the composting infrastructure, which right now we just have, for example, bins, but leaves could be added. The leaf program in city leaves could maybe go under that output also.
And another one here.
Under composting infrastructure, e.g. bins, leaves could go there.
Well,
as an outcome.
Because I think that's I mean, if we are looking at doing that, it's either subcontracting that out to someone, but it's, or facilitating it. I mean, like I said, we used to do that as a city. But I think it just became, just another task that they just gave up. So
we actually just talked about that. The funding for it went away, and we could no longer pay the contractor, Watkins Nurseries, to do that for us. The city council or whoever decided not to fund that program anymore.
There it is.
Okay, well, this is really helpful to us. So thank you for putting your heads into that. And we're going to be taking this, really going through here to kind of map out a framework for the implementation plan, but also drilling down to these impacts of all the strategies and thinking about what can we roll back up? What's going to be the most important indicator to measure the success of our plan? So I know we really got in the weeds, but that's where we had to go in order to figure out how to get to where we need to next. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Our next meeting is going to be July 15th, 9 a.m. And we'll be talking about implementation and accountability. So, what stakeholders are involved in the decision making? Where could potential funding and financing come from? What are the next steps? Those kinds of things. So for now, any other reflections or questions on where we are in the process, or feedback you'd like to share? Okay, otherwise, there's a link in the chat and also on the first slide of the slide deck. You can click on to put your thoughts in the survey. We do read through those. If you saw the email yesterday, there were about 10 questions or comments that we gathered from the the working groups after the last round, questions about what are we doing with the strategies that aren't being prioritized? What do the demographics look like of our engagement? What are we going to be doing differently next time? Things like that that would be interesting to all of you. So feel free to, or please do, jump back into that email that I sent yesterday and read through those questions and comments. If you have any others that you would like us to address for the next round, please add those either to slide 2 of this deck or in your survey link. And that's where we will just keep getting better and improve our processes. So
I'll say one more thing. I should have said maybe a second ago. I think that we all should, like the elephant in this chat room here is the politics of it all and the doability. Because if we're going to start thinking about funding, we need to start thinking about the politics of it and, you know, whose back we need to scratch in order to get things done. It's nice to talk about these things in like, we can do it way, but like politics.
So honestly, Jason, that's why that impacts mapping was so important, because we're trying to drill down to what are the real impacts that are going to meet the public need. They're going to meet the citizens that Richmond really wants to help. And so if we can show those co-benefits, that's going to reduce the barriers. That's what's going to give them the, you know, raise these strategies up in priority of where those very limited public dollars are going. And then we'll also be aligning our strategies with all the other departments and programs that are already doing things in these areas: community wealth, housing and building, safe neighborhoods. We're feeding these strategies back into those priorities. So it's not an easy, there's not this hidden $1 billion bucket somewhere that we're going to be able to start drawing from. There are limited public dollars that we're going to have to try to align with and be really strategic and creative. Maybe there is some way to establish a matching fund for some of these, and then we can go out and find grants on a revolving basis, things like that. So it's going to be really, it's going to take a lot of patience and creativity and collaboration big time, because this is not just city staff is then going to take this and make it happen. Absolutely not. It is 100% community owned. We're all, you know, part of the solution. So partnerships is a really big part of it. I know with the environment working group, I facilitated that one on Monday, and it's all about public-private partnerships. That's really how that pathway gets things done through the parks and green space. So yeah, absolutely. That's why you're all here, because you guys are the brain trust that's going to help us figure out how to get this done. But I think we're making a ton of progress. So I can't thank you enough. We're going in the right direction. I see Katrina nodding because she knows that this is how we get things done in Richmond and get our successes. So thank you again. If you have anything to share or any resources, again, the chat, the second slide. Otherwise, have a beautiful day and a beautiful June, and I'll see you in July. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.